So there's been a lot of second brain talk going around. Everyone's doing some form of something related to this. So the tools oftentimes are interchangeable. Uh, I'm adding another element. I'm adding a context layer as well. So I'll walk you through what that is and why and how. So the idea is that the second brain is agnostic to any of the models, agnostic to any of the surfaces, and it ought to know everything it needs to know about me, what's going on, but in a way that I can manage and control, in a way that I can see. That's really the key. If you rely solely on Claude memory or on ChatGPT memory, it's really hard to figure out why and how the information is getting served and how the agent is understanding and handling that information. So it also has a limit on what you can do with it and how much memory you can actually store. So most of the second brain implementations, you've got to finagle them quite a bit to get them to actually remember to take notes and to get them to remember to forget. That's not a problem in the beginning, but it becomes a problem later on where older documents, older markdowns get forgotten. The 4 tools I use for the viewability of the documents, I'm using Obsidian. This is the same type of implementation that Andrej Karpathy surfaced a couple of months ago. And Obsidian's fantastic, but that entire wiki structure has been a really powerful way to store information. I'm using Claude, and the version you're going to see me use is the terminal version. You can use any version you want. You could use a desktop app, you could use Codex. So I use the terminal version because that's where I started, and it just is sort of comfortable to me now, and I can like the way that it surfaces information. But if I was starting from scratch today, I would probably use the app. I'm using ContextNest, which is my versioned and context layer. It updates the documents from point to point, remembers the changes across the document updates, and then also lets me share the chunks of knowledge with my team or folks that I'm collaborating with, and I do that through a shared context nest. So the workflow roughly works like this, right? You talk, you ask questions. Claude handles the interaction with the document layer. The document layer is retrieved with special querying syntax. It's a series of commands, CTX commands, that you never have to learn or ever have to worry about. But it's a thing that makes retrieval a lot more efficient, actually like 3x more efficient than if you were just running it over documents raw. The thing is, the way that the documents are created, it maintains wiki syntax between them, and so it's still able to create a graph, and you can still view them as Obsidian markdowns. They're still on your machine. They're still accessible and auditable, but instead of having to be in the directory to access them, you can access them globally. So there's a lot of interoperability in the stack. So again, I'm using Claude Code, but you could use the native app, you could use Codex, you could use a Claude app. Hermes and OpenClaw access to that same brain, so it has the same context, and that's the delivery mechanism. And then the viewer is the one I use is Obsidian, but again, there's many ways to look at that stuff, right? There's also some skills built around this. So personally, I have a daily stand-up skill that I've trained to look through my vault, to look at the documents that were recently created, to look at my emails and follow up, create to-dos and all of that kind of stuff. And that happens right inside of Claude, but it uses the retrieval backend. Okay, let me show you what this actually looks like. Enough talking. So this is my second brain here. I have the Obsidian view opened up. So if you take a look, like this has a forum strategy standards. If I'm having my agent go and read forums on AI research or reply to them, this is my universe of instructions. So if you take a look at what goes into that, there's some front matter, some metadata that always gets stored in these tags, tie everything together. Also stores version history and the chain for that version history. And it's got content. Again, it's markdown readable. It's really easy to read and maintain. It doesn't have any context. It's a fresh conversation, and we're using Opus 4.8. But you'll see with this method, with the nest method, and specifically with the CTX retrieval with the CLI, you can downshift the models quite significantly in many cases and create a lot of token savings, right? All right, so again, absolutely fresh session. So let's see what it does. And I'm going to give you guys a prompt as well if you're interested on how to have it interview you and get the information that it needs to build the nest. So if we come back in, I'm going to create the vault, pick a starter recipe. There's some starter recipes here, like for an executive or for a developer, or as they install an ontology that starts to at least create a structure for how your second brain is going to work. So let's assume we are starting a business. We want to do research on the white space in the pet market in Atlanta Metro. So I'm going to ask it to create a new vault that captures the research, competitive landscape, the opportunities, supply, demand gaps, and competitors. I'm going to ask it to build the ontology based on the shape of the market. If I knew this market really well, I may design the ontology myself, but I want to keep things separate, so I want to have a different node for each one of these things. Then I'm going to ask it to interview me on my goals until it has what it needs to effectively build the nest. So this is Claude doing what Claude does. It's standing up a brain. It's initialized it, so it actually initialized an analyst research recipe automatically, and it's starting with 3 really simple nodes: research framework, reporting template, source catalog. Again, these can be anything. This is just Markdown, so it doesn't have to stick to this. You can guide it a little bit more, but it's got its brain live. I want to know where this is going. So as it's going, let's see. Let's go for all of these just for fun. And we'll say we want to do a venture. Let's say we'll do owner-operator just for simplicity's sake, with moderate investment and geographical concentration. These are good questions. And we're off and running. So while this is running, I want to know where, I didn't tell it where to create the second brain, so I want to know which directory it created it in. So it's creating it in my development folder. And if that's the case, I'm just going to go ahead and add another vault that will let me see what this looks like. What's happening is you're laying out, if you kind of think about how you would normally work with ChatGPT or Claude, all of your context is sitting at the conversation that you've had at the project level in different documents. Here you've got a database of knowledge you've created. It's graph oriented. and you can inspect that knowledge and tweak it. So once you seed it, when you go through the process of working with the vault or working with your second brain, and you teach your second brain how to update itself, how you want it to behave, just like training an employee or training an intern or a chief of staff, whatever you're hiring the second brain for, organize the information in a way that works. And I'll show you guys what I mean here in a minute. So we're going to pretend that what we're doing is creating a project plan that allows us to evaluate these opportunities, test these opportunities, and get them to market and make this actionable. So it's a little bit more salient. So it's not just a conversational partner, but it's an action partner. It's got some research. It's come back with some structure. Take a look at the structure. We've got the center connecting nodes is this ranked short list. Boarding daycare being a big theme, it looks like, connecting to different types of boarding daycare, clearly. Veterinary services and retail products. Okay, so I've asked it to create a research frame, to create a project plan and a daily to-do list. And I'm going to make it follow a 3x3 framework. So what are the three most important things to separate signal from noise? And what are three things that are important but could be delegated? And we'll turn that into a skill that I can run every morning so we can keep the project plan on task. Quite good. So take a look at the boarding daycare. This becomes, look at how lean these things are. Just becomes a map to where things go. Think about this as a database, as an intermediate database join, but using natural language. It's kind of the way that a graph would work, except in this particular case, at least on the CLI package, there's no edge types in this type of graph. Edge types can be added at the shared level, and they're important as you operationalize some of these things into live and productionalized agents, but as a second brain, they're not really all that relevant. Where they're needed, they get implemented as these intermediary index documents that basically articulate the edge. So you kind of get the idea. This connects to all of these other things. And these files are really lean. So we've got our agent here. The markdown node is going to be under plan and dashboard. So let's go to plan. There's our 3x3, the three things I must do. Lock in an anchor submarket. So it's suggesting South Fulton or in town or Cherokee. Pick a primary concept from the ranked list and build a competitor density map. Delegate these other three things. The dashboard's going to give me tracking view of how I'm doing, and I can work with my agent to evolve this however it needs to evolve, push back on it. So now let's try something completely from scratch. First I'm going to create a skill for a daily stand-up. So at this point, again, Claude has no context, and the skill is still building. So I'm going to ask it a build by question. Again, it has zero context. It has no idea what I'm talking about. There's no history in the session. Now I can see it's doing what I needed to do. It's running CTX commands to pull the context effectively. All these instructions are written into the markdown for the directory, so it has enough context to know that it's storing the second brain and to go back and scrape the second brain for the information that it needs. It's not doing primary research anymore. It's pulled the context from the nest. It's evaluated the strategic posture we built into the initial research thesis, and it's now thinking between build or buy. But it's also recommending a buy-side scan, right? That's cheap. Now, I don't necessarily know if I want to do broker, biz, buy, sell as the way to do this. Maybe I want to do direct outreach. So I'm going to ask it to create a list of folks based on our strategy and surface to outreach to. And we'll skip the whole brokerage point, full stop. What the skill does is every day, it takes about 5 minutes, it's going to read the brain first. It's going to use the CTX command to fetch the 3x3, the plans, and it's going to follow those links, meaning it's going to follow the graph wherever it needs to go. This is super important. Again, right now there's just not that much content. So in theory, you could take everything and post it into a chat. But as this turns into something that actually operates as a brain, you don't want all of that context in a chat. It makes it difficult to focus, and it makes it difficult to finagle the agent to do what you want. And so you either don't get the results you want, or the agent compensates by spinning up sub-agents and trying to create focus, and that spends tokens and also creates drift. Instead, it's got a very clear path on how work gets done, how that stand-up gets evaluated, and how to prioritize the information in your brain. It's amazing, actually. So it's then going to go through the 3x3 and use whatever the interaction we're having to prioritize it, and it's going to update artifacts that exist in my brain so it always has context. That's how the skill will work, and we'll try it here in just a minute. So while this goes, I'm going to close this out. Close it out and create a new session. Again, the reason I'm trying to create a new session here is to demonstrate how this works with no context. So there's my pet stand-up. Let's see what it does. So I can see it's reading the CTX nodes. It's fetching the nodes through the query, the CLI query. So I can see it's fetching the information from the nest. And we've got some open decisions to make. So let's say I like South Forsyth. I like that. And, you know, I can't help it. Think about a tech forward. Actually, let's go undecided. And then I've got no new intelligence. And we'll go from there. At a research phase, I can be a little bit more liberal with human in the loop on this. We're just gathering information, doing the setup. But as we get towards an operating rhythm, I'm going to start to lock in the queries. So as CTX queries, again, by asking Claude to write them specifically and repeat them back to me, so that as I have agents go out and, let's say, create outreach and start to automate those outbound emails, I can ensure that it's not going to drift all over my second brain and leak information back to where it doesn't need to go. I can control for specific tags, so I can tell my second brain just to pull, let's say, P0 documents or something along those lines. We'll give it a task in a minute to illustrate this, but that's kind of where the superpower of this lies. Okay. So we've got our model switched up to a cheaper model. I'm actually going to go one model down just to illustrate, again, the cost advantages of this approach. And we'll go down to haiku. Okay. I'm going to create a tone document for outreach. I want tone mirroring for each person we reach out to. I would want to give it a little bit more information about myself and my priorities, the things I care about, so it can inject some more personality for me into here. But assuming I've been working with this for a little while, it's going to catch some of those language patterns anyway. Another good idea is to ask it to research your posts and copy the tonal model down. So let's actually do that. I'm going to ask it to look at my blog. I'm going to ask Claude to split it out into two different buckets. General outreach, so what's my general tone if I'm doing outreach, and specific outreach for segments. So assuming we've got some segment clusters here, and we can already see the graph has gotten a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable, because we've trimmed down the nodes. Okay, we've got some outreach targets. If I wanted to push this into a proper workflow management tool, let's say I'm using ClickUp or Monday, or let's say I am using Salesforce, I could set up an MCP pretty quickly that would connect and either have the skill when I'm running it, push out, or I could tell it directly to interface with that MCP, whatever it is that I want to be able to. Okay, we've got our nodes set up, and we'll do one more thing. I'm going to say write a CTX query that deterministically fetches our general and personal tonal documents. Now, I've given it this suggestion, but because we've now been working together for a little bit and we've given it some focus appropriately, the agent is pressure testing whether or not this is going to be a distraction for us or not, likely because of the signal to noise instructions I gave it before. So it's going to read through some of the documents and approaches that we've built into the brain already in order to create some recommendations. I can always overwrite these recommendations, right? But as a thought partner, this is one of the key value propositions of setting up a system that captures the topology of the work that you're trying to do. It's much simpler. Okay, so we've now got our skill for outreach. We're going to do one final thing before we wrap this up, and we're going to say, we're going to ask it to create a list of folks to outreach to. Use the skill to populate that list with specific outreach emails and LinkedIn messages. So we have that ask has finished running. I've asked it to create a CSV, well formatted, readable, with basically a punch list of folks to reach out to. I've got myself a punch list here, primary channel for communication, and personalization notes. And then of course I've got the updated deck. So we've got our deck. I've actually got it to do a couple of adjustments, and everything is off and running.